I'm here today to talk about what happens when you decide to buy an abandoned restaurant in a small village in the middle of nowhere in rural southern Italy. Let's get into it. So it was about a year and a half ago that I stood here in my wife Ava's hometown of Dasà, Calabria, and told you guys about how we bought this building behind me. I'll keep the recap brief. You can go watch that video if you want to learn more. But basically, we were looking for a location to host our food tours, the week in dasà, where a group of guests will come and spend an entire week here, living, cooking with the locals. And we just lucked out and found this incredibly beautiful restaurant that was just sitting there doing nothing. And so we bought it. So anyway, you can go watch that video, but that's not the whole story, and quite a bit has happened since. The first problem that anyone who buys property in a place like this will find is perhaps best illustrated by this house right here. This is Ava's father's home. Not her mother's home, her father's home. Now Ava's parents live together in Mama Rosa's house, but Papa Turi has his own house. It is empty, nobody lives there, nobody's doing anything with it other than maybe storing some stuff there. I don't know about you, but where I come from, if you have a house just sort of sitting around and nobody's using it, you just sell it. But that's not really a thing here. You don't just buy and sell property at the drop of a hat. There isn't really anyone who wants to buy property here, except maybe some crazy people like me. That doesn't mean you won't see places for sale. For instance, the Locanda was technically for sale. It had a for sale sign on it. But because people are used to houses just sitting around and never ever selling here, they're quite used to a long time frame. If you've read or you've seen Lord of the Rings, you know those like tree people, the Ents, where they take like a year to say good morning?
The Ents have not troubled about the wars of men and wizards.
That's kind of what it's like here. You might find a place that's technically for sale, but actually getting to the point where you're like, okay, let's make a deal, let's do this, takes a really long time.
They must have decided something by now.
Don't be hasty.
Here there's a lot of thinking, and they'll spend months considering whether they really want to sell the property that's been in their family for hundreds of years. And I totally understand that, believe me. But it definitely makes things drag on and makes things difficult.
We have just agreed.
Yes?
But even once that decision is made, other problems can arise. Most notably, there was sort of a, I guess you would call it a zoning issue. On all the official paperwork, the building was still categorized as a post office. Yes, this used to be the old post office in Dasà back in the day. You can even see here this sort of weird discolored patch. That's where the old mail deposit box used to go. Kind of wish that was still there. Be cool. That meant that someone, before the building could be sold, would have to recategorize the building, which took time and money. In the end, it all worked out, and we had our beautiful restaurant. Great. Want to see what it looks like now? Yeah, it doesn't look so pretty right now, but that's because the Locanda is currently under renovation. You see, here downstairs was more or less perfect for us. Needed a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of decorating, but it didn't really need any work. But there's an upstairs, and it was a bit of a disaster. Basically, the roof was completely destroyed. Every time it rained, it would pretty much flood the building. All of the windows were completely busted and just totally open to the elements, not to mention wildlife. And furthermore, there was about 100 years worth of trash and junk in here. So yeah, it needed some work. Now, we didn't buy this place with the intention of making a house, but we figured, well, since we have this upstairs and it needs to be fixed up badly anyway, we might as well turn it into a place where we can stay when we come here. A surprisingly big problem was getting rid of all the junk. When I asked people around here about junk removal companies though, they looked at me like I had bugs crawling out of my ears. Sure enough, I found some companies online, a bunch of them actually, but I couldn't find anyone who serviced this area. Sure, they're in the big cities, but I couldn't get anyone to come out here. What this meant was that we had to get rid of all of the trash ourselves, but that first meant sorting it. Here there's like 4 or 5 different categories of trash and everything has to be separated. Not only that, but there's a limit to how much trash you can put out every day, and each day of the week they only pick up like one of those categories. We knew that it was going to take us forever, but we did want to move quickly on the work here, so what we did was we moved all of the trash into our friend's garage across the street. He was very kind and let us use it. Literally, Ava and I would go in there every day, gloves, trash bags, go through everything, sort everything, and every week, if we were lucky, we'd get rid of a few more bags. And we thought, okay, we'll spend the summer getting rid of the trash, and in the meantime, we can fix the roof. But it wasn't so simple. We had planned to hire as our contractor a very good friend of ours here in Dasà. He's someone we love, he's really good at what he does, but we started to have some problems with him. Namely, he just never started working. All summer, we would be like, when are you gonna start? And his answer would always be, very soon. But then the work never began. The summer's just dragging on and on. Well, the work on the Locanda is really coming along. The roof is still leaking and hasn't been fixed at all. The windows have still not been replaced, and any old animal can just come in and out as it wants. It's still just completely empty, but we have made taken the most important step, which is hanging a big painting of a naval battle. So, you know, one step at a time. We get into the fall. Ava and I are back home in the United States. The work still hasn't begun. We didn't understand what was going on, and this was probably our lowest point where we thought that this project was just doomed to fail. What we finally found out was that our contractor had some sort of bureaucratic issue with his license that actually enabled him to do this kind of work. And long story short, we had to make the very, very difficult decision to move on and find someone else. It was really hard and really painful. I mean, he was the kind of guy where when it started to rain here in Dasà, the first thing he would do before I even thought about it was he would go up into the attic and start trying to fix the tiles and stuff to reduce the water damage and stuff. He was just an amazing guy. I think that probably this is the biggest challenge about doing a project like this in a place like this. It's that, okay, I hate to be cliche here, but as Michael Corleone would say, business is personal. That's how things are here. Everyone knows everyone in town. It's one of the best parts about being here. It's the close-knit community. But then when you have to choose a contractor and they're all people you know and that you're friends with, it becomes a little bit difficult. When you hire a plumber, it's not just some guy out of the Yellow Pages, it's someone that your wife went to high school with. When you're choosing faucets and sinks and toilets and tiles and stuff like that, there are 2 people in town who sell those things, and they're both friends. And you need to decide how to sort of fairly I'll get some things from you and some things from you. Everything here is much more personal. It's all about relationships. And that can be great because it means that a lot of people will really go out of their way to help you. But it can also be frustrating in situations where you're used to a pure exchange of goods and services and money, and now you have to think about everything on an entirely different level. So that was really hard, but we did finally have to find someone else, and we did. His name is Raffaele. He's a great guy. We celebrated the commencement of work Calabrian style. The roof finally went up. No more floods. And then the cool process of fixing the facade began. I really enjoyed this part. It was cool to see them work on it. It was cool to see this guy came who made new molds to restore the sort of little designs and motifs that were on the original facade, which were all kind of just crumbling away. But once all that was done, it was time to start thinking about the inside again. One of the biggest challenges that anyone who has renovated an old Italian home knows about is the fact that the layout of the house is always really strange. Back in the past, you would have huge families living together, and the idea of privacy was sort of a foreign concept. So the house is always laid out in this big circular plan where you can't get into any room without going through another room. So forget about having a private bedroom, because your bedroom is also going to be a hallway. This is tricky because we really wanted to preserve the original walls of the house, partly because we took a little sample, we chipped away some of the plaster on one of the walls in here, and that part of the wall was made out of the sort of clay bricks that you see downstairs. Actually, almost all of the walls in here were made out of basically bamboo. Super smart building technique, by the way. They would build the bottom floor out of stone and clay bricks, but then in order to keep the upper stories lighter, the outer walls would be stone and brick and all that. Then the walls inside would just be like a wooden frame covered in slats of this like bamboo cane, and then they would plaster over that. This is all the cane here. Fun fact, that's where the word cannoli comes from. It comes from the cane that they would dry, and they would use that as the mold for the cannoli shells. At first we were like, that's pretty cool, let's just keep it. But then we learned that it's basically illegal to run modern electricity and plumbing behind those kinds of old bamboo walls. So we had to basically replace all the walls anyway, which on the one hand meant that we could change the layout of the house, but on the other hand it meant more time, more expense. Another thing you got to think about here is earthquakes. This is one of the biggest earthquake hotspots in the world, and so when you buy an old building, you have to take some precautions. For example, on the front facade of the Locanda, there's this beautiful brickwork that we absolutely loved. And there's also that brickwork here on the other side of that wall, and we thought, oh, that would be really cool to keep it on both sides. Nah, couldn't keep it on this side because for earthquake readiness, whatever, stability, they had to put basically these, I guess it's kind of like a rebar net all around and then cement that in just to help stabilize the building. As the renovations have progressed, there have been all kinds of other little unexpected problems and challenges. You know, it's the kind of stuff with all really old houses, I suppose. I won't bore you with all the details, but like for instance, this floor here we realized was super unstable. And so from the bottom up downstairs, they had to completely reinforce this floor. Now we expected this to some extent, but pretty much the situation is that everything has taken longer than we expected. Everything has cost more than we expected. Everything has been more difficult than we expected. So was this all a mistake? Absolutely not. And here's why. You see, the Locanda has become important to this community in ways that we did not expect. In so many ways. I don't even know where to begin. Obviously, we come here and we do our tours and the weekend dasà here. But outside of that, the people of dasà use the Locanda more than we do. Our beloved Spice Girls, they're a group of Calabrian women who are expert traditional cooks. And throughout the year, they've had an increasing number of people who come. Maybe they're people who are visiting Tropea, which is not too far away. They're on vacation. And they come here and they do like pasta lessons here in the Locanda. They had a group come recently of like 30-something Australians. We hold community events and parties here. Everything is always an open door policy. Whoever wants to come in, hang out, have some food is welcome. One of those visitors actually was the priest of dasà, and he loved the Locanda so much that they actually held a mass here. Does that technically make this a church now? They did it for Christmas, and they set up the Locanda like it was the, what do you call it, like the manger for baby Jesus. They even used some of my video lights to make it look cool. And they crowded in people in here and did a whole church mass in here. Oh, another cool thing that happened here, actually they've done this twice in a row. There's a nonprofit organization here in dasà called Dassos Elias, and twice now in the summer they've held a big fundraiser for children with Down syndrome. We were lucky enough to be here for one of them, and it was super fun. The kids came here, and the Spice Girls taught them how to make kuriiki, which are these a very traditional food here. It's like a savory potato donut, kind of. And then out in the square, they held like a big concert to raise money for this school for children with Down syndrome. So much goes on here, and the number of people from dasà who end up coming here when we have events has increased, even to the point where we had to remove the bar in the Locanda, which we didn't really use anyway, but we needed to make more space. But it's sort of just a vacuum. You make some more space, and then just more people from dasà crowd their way in. So there's a lot going on here, but there's another way that this project of ours is impacting the community. Here, let me show you something. See, a big problem in southern Italy in general is population decline. Over the decades, a lot of people left, usually for economic reasons, I think, and that has left a lot of abandoned houses. Some towns that you go to in the south, they are truly ghost towns. I mean, you go in, there is nobody there. Luckily, the situation in dasà isn't that bad because the population here is, how should I put it? Vibrant. That being said, it still has declined quite a bit, and so even here in the historic center, there's tons of abandoned buildings. You see, we've learned a lot going through this process with the Locanda. Renovating old houses in Italy is not exactly easy, but we've learned better ways to approach problems, and we've put together a pretty good team for restoring houses. We would like to sort of snowball the effort that we've been putting into the Locanda into other projects that can help the community. And luckily, we're not doing it alone. So we had some guests on a recent week in dasà. It's a couple, their names are Robin and Kurt, and they also brought their daughter, and they came here and saw what we were doing, and frankly, we were shocked when they came to us and said, we want to help. So just a few weeks ago, Robin came and we went on this crazy whirlwind tour of like every house in dasà. It was insane. We went to like 30 different houses. Some of them were in pretty decent, livable shape. They had been lived in recently. Many of them were complete wrecks though, to the point where sometimes the doors and the locks wouldn't work, and we would actually have to break into the houses, with the owner's permission, of course. We saw some crazy places. Some are these just massive, sprawling, almost like palaces. Some are just like tiny little one-room hovels. We found a lot of crazy stuff. The plan as it stands with them right now, though, is to restore a number of houses here in dasà that we can actually use for housing for guests. People come here, they visit dasà, they do pasta lessons, they take part in what there is to offer here, but the problem is there isn't exactly like a Hilton on the corner. So having more options for places where people can stay means that the folks here in dasà have more chances to share what they like to share. But that's not all we've got going on. We have another really big project in the works, and it has to do with this. I'm inside the old mill in dasà. When I say old, I mean old. It is probably 500, 600 years old. No one knows for sure. But what's really incredible about it is that this was a functioning, working mill for the community up until the 1980s. Our very good friend Johnny, he worked the mill when he was 8 years old with his brother who was 10 years old, just these two kids working the mill by themselves. And so he's the last person alive, really, who understands how this mill works, how to operate it. And ever since he first took us in here to show this place to us, we've fallen in love with it. And we've known from that day that we needed to get it working again. Before even getting to the technical difficulties of making a hundreds of years old mill working again, the biggest problem we had right off the bat that stalled us for years was the fact that we didn't own the mill. It was privately owned, and so it's not like you can just walk onto someone else's property and go fix their mill. That's where another really incredible couple came into our lives. They asked to remain anonymous, so I won't mention their names, but they follow the channel and they saw the last video that we made when we purchased the Locanda. And similarly, they came and asked us, how can we help? In particular, the unnamed gentleman. He's come to Dasà maybe 4 or 5 times, spent a lot of time here. And like us, when he saw the mill, he thought that this was a worthwhile project. And so he bought it. He knew that we couldn't afford to do so, at least in the short term, but he thought that it was important to get started on this project, and we agreed. So he bought it in order to allow the community, us, to do the work here, actually get this going. And it is so exciting because we've gone from just looking at this mill every day thinking we really need to fix this, we really need to fix this, to like, now we have, you know, engineers coming to look at the mechanism here to get it running again. Furthermore, all around the mill property, it was just a jungle, an absolute jungle of vines and weeds. We didn't really know what was there, but as soon as this happened, Johnny, who is giddy and excited like a school child, immediately started clear cutting all the land. And what we discovered was that there's this incredible terraced garden from who knows when that's just been totally overgrown for, again, who knows when. It goes all the way down to the river, so hopefully we'll have some sort of like community garden here soon. What we didn't realize when we bought this place was how this small act of buying a little restaurant here would end up having a big impact on the town. This is why, for us, this project is so meaningful. It's not just a house, it's not just a restaurant. And so maybe if you were someone who came here and, I don't know, you bought a restaurant because you wanted to actually run a restaurant here or something, then you might understandably think that this was a mistake. But we don't see it that way. We see this as a real mission. This place here is just the beginning of that mission. So long story short, that's a little taste of what we've got going on, hopefully in the near future. I'll be honest, I'm partly making this video to hold ourselves accountable. It helps when you've announced to the world that you want to do this big undertaking, you know? Adds a little pressure to keep going. We are hugely in debt to the people in Dasà for putting up with our crazy antics and helping us every step of the way. We also need to thank our new friends who have come in to help us with these projects. But most importantly, we need to thank you guys. As I said in the last video, it's all because people watch our videos or buy our cookbook or come on our tours that any of this was possible in the first place. We really believe that the mission we're on here is one that is worthwhile and meaningful, and that's why we're just putting everything we can into it. So every bit of support that we get from you guys helps us enormously, whether it's something as big as coming on one of our trips with us, or even just giving a video a thumbs up so that a few more people can see it. It goes a long, long way, and we thank you. So now, this is normally the part of the video where I would go and find Eva and she would cook something delicious and we'd end with a little bit of food. But I don't know if you noticed, my kitchen is sort of not functional right now. In the last video, I mentioned how there were no restaurants in Dasà, but I'm happy to say, in what seems to be a good sign for the town, that has changed. I'm here at a new restaurant in Dasà called La Tenuta del Barone. The family who opened this, they're from Dasà, but they left, they emigrated, but they came back to start this incredible restaurant. The owner's son, Valentino, is the chef, and he is phenomenal. We were shocked. And it's the kind of place where you go and Valentino brings you like a plate of tagliatelle con funghi, but with porcini mushrooms that he went up into the mountains to hunt for that day. Also, in the last video, I pointed out this little pizzeria and mentioned how it has always been closed. That is still the case. It is still not open, but that's okay because we have a new pizzeria. You guys ready for pizza?
We're always ready for pizza.
Caterina ready for pizza? This is Caterina, our niece. She's not really our niece, but she is our niece.
Sì, ovvio.
Vero?
Sempre.
7, 8 months ago, finally they open a pizzeria here in Dasà. And the good thing about this pizzeria is that they do a pizza like if we were in Naples, because the pizza is so good, it's so delicious, and I'm so happy that it's just walk distance from my home.
Hai fame?
Sì, è bellissima. Madonna che buona.
We've said it on the channel a few times before, but despite what some people think, it's not just anywhere in Italy that you can get really good Neapolitan pizza, and it's not every small Calabrian village that has really good Neapolitan pizza. And more than that, looking at the fact that we went from this being a place where you couldn't open a restaurant or a pizzeria without knowing that it was essentially doomed, and now we have, for instance, a new pizzeria that seems to actually be thriving and doing well, is a good sign that maybe, just maybe, dasà isn't doomed to the same sort of death spiral that so many small villages here in Calabria, unfortunately, seem to be experiencing. Che ne pensi del futuro di dasà?
Che ne penso del futuro di Dasà? Che siccome il mio paese è il paese in cui vivo da 12 anni, gli auguro il meglio perché è la mia patria, è il paese con cui mi sento a casa, e già quando sono distante mi manca. Gli auguro il meglio, io auguro che questo paese possa migliorarsi sempre e possa essere conosciuto da tutti quanti. Ciò che stiamo facendo con l'associazione è una cosa che proprio mi sta a cuore, è una cosa con cui cerco sempre di dare il massimo di me, perché è una cosa per il mio paese e per gli abitanti del mio paese. Facciamo questo e per tutti coloro che ci vivono e per dargli un futuro migliore, per essere conosciuti, e auguro sempre il meglio a dasà, che possa essere conosciuti a tutti. Benvenuti a dasà!
Thank you guys for watching. We hope you enjoyed this little update on what we're doing here in dasà. Before we go, a quick shout out to a pasta grammarian who made amazing looking grissini. These are real homemade style Italian breadsticks, not those Olive Garden things that you see.
They use the recipe that you find in our cookbook, so I'm sure that they are delicious.
They look pretty good to me. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Ciao.